Okay, I'm going to officially start the meeting. Welcome to the DFAC meeting. It did start a couple minutes late. We will not give the reasons why in the minutes.
You can make it official, damn it, it's my fault.
At least you're present. We're glad you're here. Do we do a roll call just to acknowledge we have a quorum? I just say we have a quorum. Can you do that?
I gotta be the roll call.
Okay, your turn, Joey. Tell us who's here.
Alright. Jorgensen.
Here.
Hart.
Here,
Ellis.
Here.
Fellows. Here. Geesey. Corey.
We have a quorum? Very good, thank you. So the meeting's called to order. Next item of business, look at the agenda, is the minutes from April 12th. And I ask for any comments, if not, a motion to approve the minutes.
I'd like to move that we approve the minutes from April 12th, 23.
Thanks, Colleen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion on the minutes? On the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None, motion carries. Thank you. Next item of business is North River Impact Fee Increase Request, Primrose. Did I say that right, Primrose? Okay, who gets to talk on this one?
I will kick us off.
Go for it.
Sarah Arkle, thank you, Chairman.
Hi, Sarah, thank you.
Arkle, Parks and Rec Superintendent, or excuse me, Parks Resources Superintendent. Gotta get my game face on. And I'll ask probably Travis to hop in when we get to details related to how this will be funded. But hopefully this park is familiar to you. I remember being here maybe a year ago, and we were talking about funding the green up and development of a park on Gary Lane. At the time, we were calling it the Gary Lane Park site. Since then, it's been named after a native flower, the primrose that grows in our foothills. Could have seen them a lot on Hillside to Hollow this year. Just a little heads up. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So this is a 1.5 acre park. It has a long sordid history that it was almost a fire station, and it was almost a park, it was almost a fire station again. So here we are hoping to develop this into a public amenity and improve, the 10-minute walk opportunity for folks in this neighborhood to access a neighborhood park. In 2020, I believe, is that correct? 2020, 700,000 was allocated for the park.
It was actually 23.
Okay, 23.
It was accelerated to 22.
I think the estimates were based on,
Yeah.
work that was being done in 2020.
Oh, yeah, when they came up with the number that went into the.
Yes, thank you. So
Impact
hopefully
study, yes.
that makes sense to you all. We estimated it would cost about 700,000 in 2020 and then budgeted that money in 2023. Subsequent staff turnover delayed the project. We ended up going with a consultant to help us finish design because we did not have designers on staff to do it. And so here we are looking at development of this park and having estimates, much more up-to-date current estimates. We're working with contractors to get better pricing. And that's why I'm here in front of you today, because the current budget that we have is not sufficient to completely build out the park. With an additional $400,000 in funding, we would be able to complete all amenities and all irrigation in the park. If you wouldn't mind moving forward with the slide, we can talk in more detail about what that additional $400,000 in funding will provide. So currently, I don't know if you are aware, but we had fronted some of the money in order to purchase the playground and fitness equipment, because we were looking at long delays in supply chain, up to 9 months for those products. So the leftover budget that we have is around 300,000. And that budget alone would only allow for those list of items. So site demolition, obviously, right-of-way improvements, utilities, a pavilion, but a much smaller footprint for the plaza. We have the playground, as I mentioned, we have the fitness equipment, as I mentioned. But if you go back to the other slide, Joey, if you'll forgive me, that does not include any of the landscaping, any of the walking path, any of the irrigation that would be needed, and items that really would finish out the park. Okay, go forward again, thank you. So the additional amenities that we would be able to install with that 400,000, that would get our budget to approximately 700,000. left remaining to utilize for the project would include all of those other items. And in looking at this park and looking at how far we've come and what's needed within the neighborhood, we felt we needed to go, come to you and ask for that additional funding so we could complete the park, rather than having a park that was partially built and then trying to figure out how to fund it later. A couple things to note here. The berm and the pollinator plantings were items that were specifically asked for from the neighborhood. The concrete walking loop is an ADA accessible walking loop that we feel is essential to include in ensuring this park is accessible for everyone. And of course, we want to have turf. We want to have appropriate site drainage and irrigation needed to grow the plants and the trees on site. So that's the kind of breakdown of where we're at and why we're before you today asking for an additional 400,000. Happy to answer any questions. If you wouldn't mind going back once. Oh, if you have any questions related to the design or anything like that, please feel free. I do think we have an additional slide that breaks out specifically how this will impact the fund. So if unless you have questions, we'll move
We'll
forward.
pause for a second there. Any questions on the design from the committee?
Dave, can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
Michael, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm trying to see from the rendering where the plaza is that was mentioned on the side, on the next slide over.
Yes,
Where is that, underneath the shelter or?
yes, committee member, you are correct. That is, the plaza is underneath the shelter.
Okay, thanks. Other questions?
Wanna,
You're okay.
okay.
No, we're figuring it out right now.
What we're here for.
Yeah.
Do you know how having this park added to the city's fleet of parks will impact the residents? Like what number of residents will be able to access it within 10 minutes? Because I think that's a goal of the cities, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking that. And off the top of my head, I think it's over 1,100 households
Wow.
will be added to our 10-minute walk. I'd have to go back and look specifically because I don't remember the exact number
I
off the
don't
top
wanna
of my
speak
head.
on record without on memory, so.
Yeah, but
we
I
can
know-
get- we
But
can-
Sarah did.
I would say it's more than 1,200
Wow.
homes served.
It was significant
Yeah.
because I
That's
remember when we
great.
went back to the original discussion about why we were placing the park in this
Yeah.
location. It was because there were, over 1,000 households that would benefit.
Yeah.
I'll put it this way to you, the 10-minute walk service area for this park does not overlap any other.
Okay, that was my follow-up question.
Yes.
Yeah, thank
It
you.
really is filling a void.
It's,
Yeah.
well, it's putting in a whole new service area where there was nothing before, so.
Okay,
Thank you very much for that.
Michael, any other questions?
No, thank you very much.
One question.
Yeah.
Where does this fall between State Street and Hill Parkway?
Oh, great
It's
question.
right in the middle.
Right in the middle, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
On the east side,
East side, right?
Yep.
Okay,
it's in between two existing crosswalks. There's one northerly towards State, towards the school, right at the school.
Mhm.
And then there's one southerly more towards State.
Okay.
So we won't get a crosswalk at this location because that would be 3 on Gary Lane, which is too many for ACHD.
any other questions?
And so the access point for those that are driving,
It's a great question.
where,
Committee member fellows, this is a neighborhood park
Mm.
and we do not have designated parking because the site is so small.
okay,
So there is availability for a couple of, you can see on the design there, a couple of accessible parking units.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
And there is on-street parking.
Like
But-
they're on the north side there, the accessible parking label.
That's right, that's
I
right.
don't know if that's north, but on the north.
It is, the map is oriented correctly. So Toby Court, there is some ability for parking. But given that Optimist is not too far, there's some other parks around that folks could access with a vehicle. This is really meant to be a neighborhood park.
yeah.
Um,
Is it driving through, that's not a road below it, that's a parking lot for a church?
Below the foundation.
That's
right?
correct.
Actually, a
Yeah.
Jehovah's Witness
Yeah.
church.
Okay,
I did link the Google Maps on there. That might help. If you want
Under the chat,
Oh,
into
yeah.
the chat, yeah. So it's right by River Glen.
I'm
basically.
sure glad you're remote, so you can help
I
us.
know, yeah.
Sorry, my mouth.
Spicing it up.
Yeah. We'll do something that I was that late.
Gary Lane there, running through north
Okay.
and south. If you
So-
were driving on Gary Lane, you wouldn't really see the site very easily because it, as you can see, it butts up to Gary Lane pretty narrowly. There's just 2 bollards there, you'd miss it in a second.
Can you show us on the map there generally where those crosswalks are you were referencing earlier? Guess
Give me the brain.
the driver, just use your mouse and point if you can. Lamplighter, is that one of them, or?
I believe
Oh, there's
that's a
one.
protected
clearly.
crosswalk there,
Yeah. So not too far.
not too far.
And the next one down. Right there.
Okay, thanks.
So like you get there, then you're on this side of the road, then you go north.
Now,
whatever.
this, you're not supposed to be doing this.
Just a side note, committee members.
So there should be no parking on Berry Lane, so you probably want to go to the neighborhood or head on into the school and walk in. Or just.
So, or
you know,
access on
or just go
Berry.
in the neighborhood, yeah.
That's the route, to your point, yeah.
There's probably a lot of people that are gonna just go ahead and use this. We did approach them about an agreement, but we didn't get a lot of support, so.
Okay.
And
Thank you for sharing all that, great questions. Want to get other questions? Okay.
I've got one. I think you just said it, but I might not have heard it. Did you talk with the church about using that parking lot?
Yes, yes.
Is that what you were just talking about? Not a lot of, yeah.
We did not get a lot of any support really for that. So-
And that may change over time as they see, you know, the park being utilized and see the benefit to the community. We have a similar agreement with the church on Sunset and 36th Street. So it's not unprecedented for us to partner with churches to provide additional parking. So it's something we can always revisit later down the road.
Other
Odds are
questions
good.
on design? Oh, go ahead, Corbin. Yep.
I just, odds are good, they're gonna use it anyway.
Mhm.
It's a possibility.
Right.
Yeah.
Other questions, Corbin, on this design or,
Nope, that's it.
okay, keep going, Sarah.
Right, I'm gonna kick it over to Travis, if that's all right with Travis, so he can talk specifically about how this will impact the fund.
Sure, so, you know, in general, increasing budget for any given project, right, means it's not available for the other projects in the plan. However, 166,000 is just available because of inflationary adjustments. Granted, that is taking into account the 9.4% that will go into effect this October, but still will ultimately be collections. There is currently sufficient fund balance in North River to do this, as well as Stewart Gulch, and there's one other one in North River. But anyway, there's adequate funding for it. And so the thought being is that when we update our plan by pushing Pierce Park out of the current 5-year window, we could just pick it up and adjust fees accordingly when we get to the next impact fee plan. So, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't think we're pushing Pierce Park out because of this. I think it was just due to staffing and other considerations. We weren't going to get to it anyway. So it's not like we're doing this at the expense of Pierce Park. It's just that one would fall outside of 5 years, so we readjust fees when we get there.
So if I were to understand what you said, Pierce Park was in the 5-year plan. That's probably how you generated the fees based on that. But due to staffing or other reasons, Pierce Park is now going out. In some ways, this addition, or rather completion of this park, Primrose, takes its place. Is that a fair way of saying that?
The only
In the 5-year window?
The only nuance I'd say is just the impact fee plan was for 10 years. So the collections theoretically for all the parks in North River were over 10 years. And since there was many, almost all of them were front weighted, like the reality is we wouldn't have had the funding anyway.
Totally makes sense. Thanks for clarifying. So the Pierce Park, you think will still be within the 10-year window. And that part is not changing also. Okay.
So if I understand it
Please.
correctly, just so that I can kind of, we we are trying to finish what we started and prioritize that. And it's nice to know that given the timeline we're projecting for other park developments within this region, we won't be having to utilize funds from another park in the future, with the understanding that the fund will balance itself. That if that's a layman's way to say it.
Right, exactly. I mean, because it'd be one thing if we were trying to do Pierce Park in 2025, then we'd have problems. But because it's outside the window, like we can readjust, recalibrate.
Well, I'll hold some of my other questions I have, personally answer some of them. The documents you submitted previously were very helpful. Anybody have other questions you want to ask? Michael?
Yeah, so just to reconfirm, monies from Primrose will come from the North River planning area, and then those monies will get replenished from pushing off Pierce Park. Just to confirm, Pierce Park is also in the vicinity of where this Primrose site will be, correct?
It's within the same planning area.
Okay, so I guess we're not taking a park away or enhancements away from one area and putting in another. It's the same general impact.
Right, we can't cross funding for the local parks. The issue that you raised does come up when you're looking at regional parks, because effectively, like Alta Harris, Spalding Ranch, and McDevitt will all compete for the same dollars.
Yeah. And then follow-up question, you said that there's 166,000 in additional funding, so is there a reason we wouldn't just need 244,000 from the North River impact fees?
Oh, so
Did I miss something?
So we're just saying the total budget is increasing by the 400, and what I was trying to do on this slide was say 166 of that is basically the inflationary adjustment that we're taking, and you fill that gap between the 166 and the 400, so call it 250.
Yeah.
That's going to be accommodated by moving out of this part.
Okay, so that is what you're doing. All right.
Yeah, it's just trying to rationalize it, so it's not purely a 400
Yeah.
increase, it's really the 250,
Yeah.
230 increase.
Perfect.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Good questions. I find that us asking questions is what our responsibility is. We're on record. Admittedly, personally, a lot of us have already done our homework, and maybe some of this is just going through gyrations to, I don't want to say check a box, but to make sure that we're being physically responsible with the money. So, other questions?
I'd like to thank you for that comment, Chairman. I think it is very important that we have that level of engagement. The staff obviously do their best to try and be responsible to these funds and to the communities that are relying on them for future parks.
Exactly.
And it's nice to have that reciprocated in some sort of forum that's publicly available. So
Yep.
thank you.
You're welcome. Trevor, yeah.
I will offer that this, because of the back and forth between, will it be a fire station or will it be a park? Will it be a fire station?
Let's bring some resolution down, right?
The fact that it was decided that it will be a park made the neighborhood folks very, very pleased.
Yeah.
So we thought we would just,
Well, isn't there, this is site tangent, but not really, because it's all DFAC.
Right.
The location for a future fire station has been identified.
That's when they identified the new place for the fire station. I said, we'll let this go.
Exactly,
to be
yeah.
a park. So when public sentiment was like,
Yep.
we want,
Well, yeah.
So
So we do 100 reasons.
we figured we'd seize on that.
Sirens at midnight would be one of them. Yeah. Very good, thank you. Corbin, your hands up in the air, I'll let you ask some questions, go ahead.
And it's not, it's a comment. Well, this isn't the first, nor will it be the last time this has happened. Since I've been on this committee, I'm sure we've had this about 6 times where a budget increase has happened. And this time it's no surprise. And again, this was approved in FY20. We know the inflation that's happened in FY23 since then, since FY20. So no surprise. I do see it's a 33% increase. Doing the math, let me make sure it's 36%, excuse me, 36% increase. That seems to match what the last 3 years have been. So not hugely different from any kind of expectations I would have. Every time the budget is asked to be increased, I don't like to do it, but at the same time, I understand the world we're in. It happens. And it is good to see that the impact fee increase is doing what it's supposed to do. Help increase the budget based on inflation. In this case, it wasn't quite enough. At this point, we're going to see it better to do projects in the future. But all in all, I think things are working the way they should be. Instead of asking for 400,000 extra, we're only asking for 244. And then in the aspect of all things, the 166 was included for this kind of thing, right? So it's all in all, I think it's working, and we are being fiscally conservative with the ability that we have to deal with inflation. So
I could just add one comment, Corbin, for thanks for your statements. I think part of the remainder, the 244,000, whatever that number is based on completing the project.
yes.
So that's part of those, maybe that's all of, that's definitely part of all those cost increases to get you to the 400, I believe would be an accurate statement too.
I think the one irrigation.
Irrigation, storm drainage,
Right.
and once you water, the water's gotta go somewhere.
All these fancy things.
I saw the list, I think
I
that's,
don't
I think that's appropriate. Pulling in.
Just in general with parks, where's the break point size wise when you start to have to add bathroom facilities?
That's a great question.
Can I, as you're asking that, can you add parking lot to this answer as well?
Yeah. Well, I think, and Trevor, you can help, address this question if I miss any items, but we really have to look at the feedback we got from the community with regard to the master plan and the site size itself. So the community provided us with master plan that we are showing you today. The community prioritized the fitness center, the shelter, and the playground. And the community prioritized on-street parking. So it's a dialogue, especially with these parks that are, in people's neighborhoods. As you get to larger sizes where it's a community park, a larger footprint, 5 acres, 6 acres, then we would start to look at, parking that would serve the function of the park. Obviously, we would love to put a restroom in if we could at this site, but between the size of the site, the budget, and the community feedback, that's not what came out of it. I don't know that through our comp plan, we're required to do certain amenities on certain size parks. But obviously, as you get to a bigger park that's hosting events or hosting sports fields, then it's a different conversation versus something like this that's right down the street.
Great question, follow.
That's,
I'll just add, I'll give you a chance, in my experience with private parks in neighborhoods, these 1 acre size parks, none of them have bathrooms.
Yeah.
You're walking from your house or you're riding your bike over and back. And that's typical for a small park.
I was just gonna follow up that is there a correlation with restrooms and parking lots where, if we're having a park that needs restrooms, it probably also needs a parking lot because of the size it warrants? Is there any correlation there?
I don't know that we've defined necessarily a correlation. I think I would look at it maybe from the other direction, depending on the size of the park and the size of the parking lot, what type of bathroom facility would be necessary to service the folks who are coming to the park. But we have many bathrooms across the city that are only open during the summer months, and people are using our parks year round, which is why you'll see porta potties placed at some of the park sites because the neighborhood has asked for it, for example. So, if that's always an option moving forward, if it becomes an issue, then we would really look to public feedback for that, catalyst. But
Thank you.
sure.
Okay, any other questions for the city? Corbin's hand is not up, so having said that, I bet the next slide, if it does ask for a recommended motion. I'll look for any more discussion, if not for motion.
I'd like to move that we approve the $400,000 in North River impact fee funding for the development of Commerce Park.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Corbin second, okay, any discussion on the motion? Michael?
Should we delineate where the monies are coming from between the 166 and the roughly 250 from the North River impact fee?
Travis, I'll look to you for guidance there.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it's all coming from the North River
Yeah.
Impact Fee Fund. It was, and so it's the same pot. It's, it's all fungible, so, I mean, you can call out the 166. But
But
at the end of the day, it's all fund balance. It's just a matter, effectively, we're just trying to say how we're replenishing those funds.
Yeah,
And there's a recognition, thank you for that, Clay, there's recognition, the existing funds, the funds exist today.
Right.
There's adequate funds in the balance to cover this. It just gets replenished through two different means here.
Right.
yeah.
So I don't hear a need to change the motion.
No,
Okay,
all right, so all we need is extra 400.
okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Did you second the motion?
I heard Corbin
So,
say.
yeah.
Aye.
That was a test, that was a test. Yes,
Trying to be present, I'm sorry.
Corbin's in the room, yes, he is.
I'm here. I meant to be there. I did. I promise.
Okay, I love it. If there's no further discussion, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the 7/12/2023 defect meeting.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you.